Hello and welcome to the third part of creating the Todo App backend using SpringBoot. So before I go to the third part, let me give you a quick summary of the first and the second parts. So in the first part, we developed the task service. We developed all the endpoints related to tasks like the post endpoint to create the task, get to retrieve the specific task, put to update and delete to delete the specific task. And in part 2, we created the users endpoint to create the user and also to verify login credentials. And I'm also attaching the videos for part 1 and part 2 over there. So if you have not already seen, you can actually click there and see those videos and then come back to this. Now in this part, what we are going to see is how we can actually protect the task endpoints using JWT, using JSON Web Token, which is the most standard security protocol in today's world in protecting apps. So what happens is something like this, like during the login flow, once the login credentials are verified by the server, then the server generates a JSON Web Token, which is a long one, and it sends back the JSON Web Token to the user. And then for every subsequent request to the task endpoints, like for creation of task or for retrieval of task or for any other task endpoints, the user sends the JWT along with the request header. And in the server, in the task service, we have a JWT interceptor. We have a filter which basically intercepts all incoming requests to the task endpoints, and then it verifies if the JWT is valid. And if it is valid, then it lets the user then it basically forwards the call to the task service. And if the JWT is invalid, then it returns a HTTP 403 forbidden error. So this is how basically most of the apps into this world are being protected. The endpoints of the apps are being protected using the JSON Web Token. Now in this video, if you stay along with me, then you will see how we can very easily implement JSON Web Token and without using Spring Security, because Spring Security is really extremely good, but it's also super complicated. So for a very simple application or for most of our normal application, we can actually implement security, tight security, even without involving Spring Security. So here is a quick summary of JWT, but I also have a video of JWT which is over there, and you can refer to that video of JWT and before you come back here. So a quick summary: the JWT is a very compact security token. As you can see here, it consists of 3 parts. The red part here is the header, and then the violet part is basically the payload which contains the main load, and the last blue part is basically the signature. So let us start with the demo, and the code base is available in my GitHub repo, and the link for my GitHub repo is mentioned in the description. So please go to the description and find out my GitHub repo, and please note that the branch is todo-app-part 3. So this is part 3 of the Todo App, where we are going to see how the JWT is created and how the JWT is validated. So now let us see the code base. So I have already cloned the code base in my local ID, which is IntelliJ, and now I'm going to go and see in the user controller, like in the user credentials endpoint, when a user is trying to log in, and if the user ID and the password are correct, then the JWT is generated. So first is, of course, this service layer method is called to verify the credentials, and if the password hash matches, then the control returns back here within the controller, and then the controller makes yet another call to the service layer to generate JWT. So if the authentication is successful, a JWT is generated using the Nimbus JWT library. And as I had already explained, like in JWT, the payload is the most important thing, which is the middle part of the JWT, and the payload can contain multiple custom claims, which are custom key value pairs. Like here we have 2 custom claims, user ID and username, and also the expiration time. The expiration time is not a custom claim though. So the custom claims are nothing but different key value pairs which I can insert in the JWT. So I have inserted the user ID and the username in the JWT, and that is how the JWT is created, and the JWT is returned back also. The JWT is returned back also to the caller via the header. So as you can see, when the user gets back the response, he gets the user body. Along with that, he also gets an HTTP header by the name authorization. So the key of the HTTP header is authorization, and the value is the JWT string. So that is how the jot is obtained. Now the responsibility of the user, so this endpoint is normally called by any front-end application, like maybe a React application or an Angular application, or maybe any other JavaScript application, or even it can be another back-end Java application which can call this front, which can call this backend, which can call this endpoint. Now the responsibility of the client or the caller, whoever it is, either a JavaScript or a Java or whatever it is to pass the jot with the header for all subsequent requests. Why? Because what we have done is we have created one filter here, one security filter, or rather an interceptor here, by extending the handler interceptor class within Spring Boot. So within Spring Boot there is an handler interceptor class, and if we extend that, if we implement that, then if we override the pre-handle, then we can write some validation here. This is a concept similar to servlet filter and specific to the Spring Boot framework. So what I'm doing here is I'm receiving the jot from the header. So I'm expecting the jot would be present in this field of the header, and I'm receiving that jot, and I'm verifying that if the jot is empty, then I immediately set a response to SC unauthorized, which means HTTP response 403, and I return false. But if there is something valid text in that X jot user field, then I'm validating the jot, and here is the code to validate the jot. So the jot is parsed, and there is a double validation here, and this is very crucial to understand. Why double validation? First validation is against the signing, and the second validation is against the expiration time. There are many projects where people do not choose to validate the jot for the expiration time, but I would strongly recommend to do it, because normally jots are not very long lived. Maybe they are for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever. So I strongly recommend to do the second validation, because in case the jot is stolen by an attacker, then also the damage would be for a minimum time if you always validate the jot for expiration time. So that is how the jot is validated. Now let us go to this class, which is web MVC configurer, and here we can add the interceptor. So here what I have done is, this code means that any call to API/1/tasks and any other endpoints under tasks, and any endpoints with post or get or whatever will be intercepted by this jot interceptor. And the jot interceptor, what the jot interceptor will do, it will try to retrieve the jot. If the jot is not present, or if the jot is invalid, then it will not even delegate the call to the corresponding controller method. But if the jot is valid, then only it will let the controller layer receive the call. So that is how we can do a jot validation. But please do remember one thing, here we are not explicitly using Spring Security, because Spring Security is very sophisticated but also very complicated, a bit complicated. I will make other videos on Spring Security, and then I will create a project of how we can use Spring Security in a Spring Boot project. But this is a much simpler setup, yet very secure setup, that you can actually create a jot manually, and you can validate the jot without even using Spring Security. So now let us go ahead and run the application, and let me show you how it works. So let me start the application using Java -jar, and again all the commands to run the application and to test the application are there in the README. So the application is now running, because before that I cloned the repo and then I created the package, but you need to clone the repo and create the package by yourself. And now when the application is running, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a user, and then, so let me first create the user. Using this command, we'll create the user. Yes, the user is created because 201 is the HTTP status returned, and I know that that is the HTTP status because with this particular parameter, of the curl command, we can return the HTTP status. Now I'm going to log in to the using the same credential, so that I retrieve, so that I am able to get the jot in the response header. Yes, so as you can see that we have received the jot in the response header, and this is a complete verbose output indicated by this -v, and along with the HTTP header also the user object is written. So -v means it is verbose, and if I copy from here, so this is the jot, I need to copy the jot, and then for all subsequent requests to the task endpoint, I have to supply the jot. So let me first try to make a request to the task endpoint without the jot. So here is a jot being used to call the task endpoint. So yeah, so I'll copy it here for the time being, and I'm going to try to create the task without passing the jot in the header. And we have received 401, which means I'm not authorized to access it. Now I'm going to use the jot, use the created jot. Sorry, I need to again request that jot because that jot is lost. So I will again make another request to the login endpoint, to the credentials endpoint, so that I get back the jot. So this is the jot. This is the new jot that I have received. I will copy the jot and put it in the header. So now I'm requesting that same task endpoint with the jot. So we have received HTTP 201, which means that the task has been created. Now with that jot, the task has been created. Now you can actually call any other endpoints within any other task related endpoint, but you need to pass that jot in the response header. Like you need to pass the jot as the value of the authorization response header, so that the task endpoints, so that basically the jot interceptor lets you invoke the task endpoints. So that is how the jot validation is done. And again, I would request you to clone my repo and try it out yourself, and because seeing is believing. And if you think that this actually helped you, then please feel free to share it with others. Please provide your feedback in the comment and subscribe and like, because then I would also be motivated, and then I would also be motivated to create more interesting videos. Thank you very much and have a nice day.